Hey guys, this is Anthony from themovieblog.com, and I'm here with a new video review. This time I'm going to be covering Netflix's Marco Polo. Um, Guys already know I'm kind of jumping around here. I started off with, Iron Fist. I kind of stopped. Now I'm jumping over to Marco Polo. I'm going to get back to Iron Fist. I'm actually going to also start covering CW's The Flash. The only reason, the main reason that I'm covering this instead of Iron Fist right now is because it's a little bit more convenient for me. You can actually download this show to your mobile device, and it's really helpful for me in the subway. You can't do that with like Netflix's Iron Fist or anything like that. That one you have to strictly be in a spot. So that's the main reason that I'm going to also start adding Marco Polo. Plus, this show is awesome. This show is amazing. You guys are going to love this if you start to check this out, or if you are checking it out right now and you're joining in and just watching in. Let's talk about it. The first thing that really stood out to me about this show is that it's beautiful. This place is gorgeous, but it's violent. It's like a dangerous place, harsh environment, but it's full of gorgeous sights to behold, especially considering the context of the time frame. This show takes place during the 1300s or 1200s, something like that, I forget. But it takes place during the time of when Kublai Khan and the Khan dynasty is actually, the Mongolian armies are taking over a huge portion of Asia and some of Europe. But we're introduced to this gorgeous place, these gorgeous characters, this gorgeous environment, and this beautiful story and setup for what's going to be coming in the rest of the season. Now, one of the things that this show does really well is they start to plant seeds. They're not going to solve or answer every question in the first episode. However, they're going to start inserting some more questions or start introducing some storylines that are going to be followed up on later on in the season. And this show is actually really good at that. That's called world building. They're actually really good at that. It's really Game of Thrones-esque, and you're probably going to hear me say that a lot in this video. This show is very Game of Thrones-esque in the way that it approaches storytelling and characters. One of the most intimidating moments in the show is when we're introduced to the Kublai Khan's court. You actually see the Latins and whatever's left of Marco Polo's group that traveled to the east. Whatever's left of them is now crawling their way up to the Khan's throne in his court. The reason that's happening is because they got captured. They were wandering around. They were caught in the Kublai Khan's lands, and they got captured. And he's like, "What are you doing here? Where are the priests that you promised me?" He was somewhat expecting them, apparently, but they don't have what it is that they promised to bring, and that's where things get a little interesting. It's one of the most intimidating moments because and one of the most gut-wrenching moments as well. It's also the moment where Marco Polo is actually abandoned by his father in the Kublai Khan's court. It's also one of the great moments of the show because it gives us one of the show's first great monologues in the show. Now, this show is going to be known for great monologues, and I just want to do a quick little timeout because I'm going to bring this up again. There's going to be a lot of Game of Thrones comparison because Game of Thrones not only sets itself apart from other television shows with its lavish sets and wonderful storytelling, but it's also these great monologues with this great delivery by these great actors that give us some of the most memorable moments in television history because of the way that these guys are delivering these just grand monologues. And this show also has that going for it. This is one of the moments where Marco Polo delivers one of the great monologues he has. I think he's just describing the desert that they traveled and how treacherous it was for them to get there, but how it was also beautiful. And he gives this poetic explanation of how it almost, how easy it is to die out there for a man. And the Kublai Khan, he loves this. He loves this way that Marco just expresses himself in a poetic fashion, and he takes a liking to Marco at that moment. And again, it's one of those moments where Marco delivers one of his first great monologues in the show. There's going to be some more great monologues in this show, so just strap in and stay tuned because things are going to get fast from here. We now actually take a look back into the life of Marco Polo because up to this point, we're introduced to the Kublai Khan, we're introduced to Marco Polo, we understand the Latins and their travels, but we don't really understand the history of Marco or how he wound up here. And that's when the show takes a time out and it goes back and gives us a good look into where Marco is from and his relationship to his father. He actually didn't know his father. His father had kind of left his wife at, I think, before Marco was even born. He came back 17 years later. It was like, holy crap, I have a son. And his son was like, well, mom's dead. That was a nice little gut punch and welcome home. So Marco didn't really grow up knowing his father, and his mother had just passed away. You know, his mother's the only one he knew. He's living in Italy all alone as a boy. I'm sure he's heard stories about his father. His father's supposed to be coming back someday. His mom probably, you know, constantly reassured him. And then he came back, but it was too late. So with Marco in a state where, you know, his mom's passed away and his dad is, you know, a traveling guy, but he's here, but he's leaving again, he decides to stow away with his dad and follow him along on his adventures, this time following his dad on his travels to the east to establish trade routes. And that's what makes this moment that much more crushing, because Marco didn't even really know his father. He was just now starting to get along and bond with him, and his dad trades him to establish trades in the east. Another reason this show reminds me of Game of Thrones is because the court of Kublai Khan seems just as treacherous as King's Landing. Like, you go in there and you can feel the tension. You can feel what's going on. You're introduced to a lot of new characters and a lot of people who seem to have their own perspectives and agendas and opinions on how things should go from here. We are introduced to Hundred Eyes. We're introduced to the Khan's son, Jingham. We're introduced to Vice Regent Yusef. We're introduced to the Minister of Finance. We're introduced to Khan's brother, and Eric the Strong, as well as his cousin Kaidu from the House of Ugadai. We're introduced to all of these cool characters, and they're from all these different parts of the world. And it just like Game of Thrones, you know, you get the sense that these guys are going to be seen in the first episode, and then they're going to scatter about. You know, they're never going to be interacting in the same scene unless it's going to be like some monumental moment. These guys don't get together often. But that's the other cool thing about why it's very reminiscent of Game of Thrones, is because we follow a multi-narrative approach. You know, we just don't follow just Marco Polo. No. We follow around the stories with Marco. We follow around the stories of the Kublai Khan himself, his son Jingham. We actually follow along with the antagonists of the show, or at least the presumed antagonists, the way they're presented as antagonists with the actual South Chinese armies. We get to see Empress Dowager and the Chancellor and so on and so forth. We get introduced to their own perspective, and actually, they don't seem that bad. You know, they don't really seem like bad guys. Obviously, the Kublai Khan is a conqueror. He's the bad guy. You know, he's going around invading people's lands and taking over. But he's so charismatic that he actually is presented in a way that, you know, you actually almost want to root him on, like a Lannister. Then there's his whole court. It's wonderful that Marco is introduced to this whole new world, and he's exploring all these new things about this new culture, but he quickly learns, and it's quickly reiterated to him by Hundred Eyes, and he gets the sense from others that he's not just a guest, he's also a prisoner. And it goes both ways. You know, he might be caged up one day and he might be allowed in a brothel another. You never know. But that's where this show goes. That's where the world building begins. That's how we're introduced to the wonderful world of Marco Polo. And there's a lot of things I kind of skipped over and glossed over. I don't want to entirely ruin it for those that will check out the show. I'm going to continue doing recaps of this and opening up discussion. There's a lot of things I keep forgetting. Like, I can't remember if like 100 Eyes is like how long he's been with the Kublai Khan, or where his standing is. Like, is he planning? I honestly saw the show before, but I don't remember, which is going to be cool to rewatch it with you guys. But if you're new here to the movie blog and you like this video, please make sure that you drop a like. And if you want to join on and follow on with us, subscribe. That's all for now, guys.